Take part in the community poll linked in the description to let us know what kind of content you prefer from this channel. Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Malik and I yet again here to talk about another Nolan Batman movie. Last time we did Batman Begins, so this time obviously it's The Dark Knight. So just like last time, if you'd like to watch along as we discuss it, then get your own copy of the movie to timestamp 0 and we'll let you know when to press play. If not, you can just listen to this on its own as a kind of podcast type thing. So wasting no time, let's just jump right in. Press play in 3, 2, 1, now. So unlike Begins, neither of us bothered to rewatch this movie for this commentary because we're already pretty intimately familiar with it. What's your history with it, even though we've kind of gone into that a little bit already?
Well, like the first one, I didn't see this in theater, but it was also rerun on cable constantly. And this movie, it's interesting because when I was a kid, I was in middle school when this movie came out, and I remember seeing, for whatever reason, our teacher, he got a laminated poster. I think it was the first reveal of Joker. It was black and white, I think. The only thing that was in color was his lipstick, or at least
Mm.
the part of the makeup around his mouth. And he had that in his in our classroom, one of our teachers, and that's kind of how I even found out this movie was a thing, that it was even coming out, because this is before I get like I get on the computer constantly and like keep up with movie news and everything. Um, for me, that doesn't really start until I want to say 2011, when um, we had first gotten the news. I want to say it was then. It was either 2010 or 2011 when we found out Sony was remaking, well, not remaking, but rebooting Spider-Man, and that they cast Andrew Garfield. That's the time that I start keeping up with movie news. Um, so I had no idea this movie was coming out. I didn't get to see it in theater. Um, but it's interesting to look at the impact it's had. I mean, oh, I should say I was kind of, I'm not gonna call myself an idiot, but as a kid, like I didn't get Joker until this movie. Like I was like, why does everyone why is everyone so obsessed with this character? Like he's just a guy, he's just a thug in some makeup that hides behind henchmen whenever Batman shows up, and Batman beats him in like 2 seconds. Um he's
Which
the
I mean is
least
certainly true of some adaptations of Joker.
Yeah, but that is how I viewed the Joker before this movie came out. I'm like, he's literally the lamest guy. He's just a guy. He hides behind some henchmen, and he's no physical threat to Batman whatsoever. Like, why is everyone so obsessed with this character? And this movie is and continues to be literally the best case I have ever seen for making Joker a legitimately threatening and compelling villain, even though he really can't go toe to toe with Batman in a fight.
Yeah. And like that obsession that the pop culture has with him only skyrockets as a result of this movie. Like Batman and Joker both were already like ridiculously iconic characters among the most popular in all of fiction. And then this movie happens and that kind of balloons out of control even more and we are still 12 years later in the immediate wake of that, I think. And like I can't honestly speak too much to my first time seeing this movie. I know for sure that it is like among the first movies that I ever see more than once in theaters because this is 2008 and so I think this is like the first year where I'm like, "Oh yeah, I can go to movies more than once." So I see this at least twice in theaters. I see Speed Racer by the Wachowskis at least twice in theaters, and I see Pixar's Wall-E at least twice. And like this is when I start like paying attention to the movies I watch and how I watch movies, and I start like actively thinking about it and like what are my favorites. And this like 2008 was a real year for me in terms of movies, but that's as far as it goes in terms of me remembering the circumstances of how I saw this. I'm pretty certain I saw this with both my parents, but like my memory is a little fuzzy. Which I mean, I remember the movie itself far more than I do the experience around it. So that just speaks to how memorable this film is.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I saw this like on TV, and like this is 2008 was just a big year for movies in general. Well, particularly comic movies because you had both this, you had the start of the MCU with Iron Man, and this was also one of the first times like everyone in my school, like not just major nerds like me, but everyone in my school was suddenly talking about a comic movie, and that wasn't necessarily commonplace. Like everyone, like most people saw Spider-Man, most people, like have at least seen bits and pieces of those movies. Um, but they weren't talked about nearly as ubiquitously and as often as this film is.
Yeah, no. And like
This
this
film
movie
touched everyone.
brought
I remember watching it was I want to say it was cable the cable guy TV, but like the news portion, and they were talking about how insanely popular this movie was and the fact that critics just critics absolutely adored this film. Like one of the first, not oh yeah, genuinely like I would say like aside from Logan is definitely one of if not the most critically acclaimed comic book movie ever made. Like this is genre um this was genre bending like it quote unquote justifies comic book movies. Like you know what I mean like that snooty thing of it's a crime drama first.
yeah.
Um
And like to this day, I think I like not to undersell how well Logan was like received and critically acclaimed. I think the reception to this movie still pretty handily beats it. Like to this day, I don't know if this movie really has competition in terms of like how well like the mainstream like quote unquote highbrow film press received it. I still don't think it's been topped in that arena yet.
yeah, I don't either.
And like again,
It
this is kind of the thing that would happen with Avengers, where like we discussed with Batman Begins, that movie is successful, but not everyone sees it. By comparison, everyone sees this movie.
and this movie was because like a lot of people didn't even see Batman Begins, um, yet alone even know it existed. So to get this film and it stands on its own so well and gives us one of the most compelling villains, not just in comic movies, in all of cinema. It was pretty impressive that this movie is as well regarded as it is, and it's a continuation. But it's like I said, it stands on its own so well that anyone can just walk in, see this movie, follow the characters all fine.
Yeah. And like on that level, like maybe the one of the few things that would potentially confuse people is that we open and Scarecrow is just here. But I remember like the multiple times that I'd seen this movie before I saw Begins and like never being thrown by that.
And this is how I wanted us to do. This is how I think Sony should have done a reimagining of Spider-Man. Just open it, he's already Spider-Man, like they did with PS4.
Mm-hmm. And like he's
And I
already
think
got a bit of an established rogues gallery.
we've got a Scarecrow. And that's pretty much the only major comic book villain that we have pre this movie. I mean, we killed Ra's al Ghul at the end of the last one. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's nice. It's nice that we have something already established.
And like immediately we and like this is part of what I said at the end of the last movie, how it feels like they knew what they wanted to do with the sequel immediately, like before Begins even came out, where they're talking about escalation. And immediately we open this movie with, okay, Batman shows up. Obviously, not too long after, a bunch of guys are going to assume that they can just do what he does and he's going to get a bunch of imitators.
Yeah, copycats. And this is the first movie to give us. I mean, I like the aesthetic of this suit a lot. It's very very simple, bold. I just like the look of this most compared to the suit that he switches over to. But to finally invent a costume that where he can turn his head, I think is really not only is that a major milestone for just Batman in general, since we've had so many movies up to this point where he just can't turn his head. Um, it makes fighting and just overall performance a lot easier on whether it be the actual actor or a stunt actor,
Hmm.
and it looks cool. Um, I it's a little it's a little too armory for for my taste. It's not um Arkham Knight Batman bad, where it's literally a suit of straight up metal armor. Um,
Yeah.
but I like it. I like it. So we are how far are we in? We are only like 11 minutes. Oh, 11 minutes to the dot.
Yep.
That's our first little glimpse of Joker. We haven't seen Joker the person yet, but I just want to ask, where was your mindset at as with the Joker as a character? Because I already told you how I felt about him pre this movie.
Well, I mean, we open with him. He's like the first guy that we follow. So we have gotten a bit of him. I am honestly not I'm kind of like you were in that before this movie comes out, Joker's not really a character that I think about all that much. He's not someone that I hold in a lot of high esteem. After this movie, I'll like go back to the 90s animated series and like this movie will be the benchmark Joker that I compare other adaptations to for a while. Before this comes out, I just know that Joker is the guy who fights Batman and like he's crazy and that they're each other's arch enemy, and that's about the extent of my knowledge. So this
Oh,
movie did. I didn't have like any. There weren't any like pre-existing definitive quote unquote takes for this movie to pass or fail against for me.
not that I consider this a definitive take, but I'm just remembering I do have an incarnation of the Joker that I really like pre this movie, and that's the one from Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker.
Yes, I also saw that movie before this one. So yeah, like I'm aware of the '90s animated, and I like him, but 2008 is like a time in my life when I'm not really capable of being critical of the things that I watch. And so I just kind of take everything at face value. And I'd like to think that this movie is like the start of that changing, or at least part of that process. It's around this time.
I would agree with that, but the main reason that I like that Joker in that particular movie isn't just because of how funny and sadistic and creepy he is. He can actually stand toe to toe with Terry and like take him in a fight.
Mm-hmm. And this movie very cleverly, until near the end, doesn't actually have Batman and Joker like trade blows in any sense. So that's not always on your mind as to like, okay, why can't Batman just punch him? He's clearly not as good of a fighter. We have them sort of fight each other at the party, but this movie is very smart to keep them physically apart for so much of it.
Either that or put Batman in a situation where he can't just punch his way out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the interrogation scene, which famously is my favorite scene in the entire film. Um, he is trying to beat the information out of this guy and intimidate the information out of this guy, but it's not working because Joker just does not is not afraid of Batman, just does not care.
Yeah.
I think that Harvey Dent is handled beautifully in this movie. His tragic turn does not work if you're not endeared to him immediately, and we absolutely are.
Yeah, no. Like he this is a weird thing to say maybe, but this isn't like my definitive version of Two-Face, but it is my definitive version of Harvey Dent. Like when I think who he should be like in his prime before all the bad stuff happens to him, I think this version because he Aaron Eckhart doesn't get enough credit because when he goes bad, you believe just how broken he is. But before then, he also manages to like believably sell you on a guy who is almost impossibly perfect and morally upright and charming and just like you don't want anything bad to happen to this guy because he's just such a good person. And like he's so smooth.
That's one of my favorite lines.
He's
I
so
recommend you buy it.
smooth. It's great.
Yeah.
And then he's like, I got more to say. It's like, yes, I would clap for him too. We briefly mentioned during last time Maggie Gyllenhaal as replacing Katie Holmes. I tried to look into it. I couldn't find too much information beyond just it was Katie Holmes' choice not to be involved. Either she wasn't available or she just didn't feel like doing a sequel. But again, having seen this movie first, I do still think of Maggie Gyllenhaal as Rachel, and I think she gives a really good performance.
So do I. Um, I mean, I don't have the thing where I see her as Rachel any more than I see Katie Holmes as Rachel. Um, but it's I've come. I mean, I never necessarily needed coming around on Maggie Gyllenhaal. It's just that we started with Katie Holmes. I would have preferred we have not had to recast her. But they got someone good for the role ultimately, so that's what matters.
Yeah.
What's interesting about this being a crime movie, much like with Daredevil, you kind of learn stuff about overall crime and law enforcement that like on average, like I would assume most people just don't take the time to find out, or just the average person just wouldn't know. Like like Cap talks about like how like what a RICO case is, and just all the inner workings of the department, and how Gordon needs Harvey's help. He's gonna try to clean up the city, and all of this is really interesting that they're already working towards a better Gotham, and Gotham by and large has gotten better. Um, we're gonna see the decline of that the more and more we see Joker, but it's we're slowly setting up that we have a mission statement here that not only those two, but Bruce Wayne is also working towards as Batman.
Yeah.
And Lau is Bruce. Lau is kind of a evil business tycoon and everything. Like I can't even like pinpoint what other stuff I've seen him in aside from this. But every time I do see that guy, he's an evil business tycoon.
I'm gonna need to like look up his credits later because I do know his face from other things. But like on the note about like
Oh, wait a minute. He's an Arrow. He talks to Moira, and he's like, "Yeah, we made mistakes or whatever." Like he's part of the secret cabal that's involved with the list and Mount Merlin.
Huh.
Oh wait, you haven't even seen Arrow, have you?
Not past season one, no.
Okay, so I'm not spoiling anything for you, but yeah, that's who that is.
Ah. But yeah, just to the note about like the crime and sort of uh maybe an unintentional, not unintentional, but underlooked sort of aspect of the sort of realistic level of darkness to this movie is the things that ultimately leads to Harvey's tragic downfall are the kind of things that you could see tragically happening all the time in real life. Specifically, the fact that he's like the one, he and Rachel are the only, like, really straight up, uncompromisingly moral people in this sort of like business. And for reasons of like we just need the manpower or we feel justified that we have to fight back against the bad guys, we will keep crooked cops on the force who Harvey says he investigated. And so the system is kind of stacked against him already. And so people who are susceptible to falling in with criminals and like performing criminal activity themselves are being sort of trusted over this guy who's really the one who has people's best interests at heart. And you can see like on Bruce's face, like immediately, this is the first scene that the two of them are together, and already he's looking at Harvey like, this guy gets it. Maybe this guy is the guy that this city needs.
Yeah, this is what we've been waiting for. Well, this is what he's been waiting for. Someone who can, because when he even says that, I think that's the moment that it clicks with Bruce when he says, "You think Batman wants to do this forever? How could he? Batman's
Yeah.
looking for somebody to take up the mantle."
And like I know that Captain Logan has his sort of pet peeve, that being like he likes the idea of Batman having adventures that we don't get to see on screen. And is it a little bit stifling that this movie takes place only a couple of months after Begins and we're already having this discussion of like, is it time for Batman to stop? I think that's really interesting, and again, it's part of this movie's realism in a way that it feels like realism to make a point and not just for its own sake, where it's like, okay, Bruce Wayne, for as capable and competent and as much money as he has, realistically, it's most likely that one person really only could do what he does for a few months less than a year before they'd have to get out of the game. And it's like we see him falling asleep in meetings and stuff, and it's like Batman can't, in this universe, in this kind of world, Batman can't be Batman for years and years on end. That's just not gonna happen.
Um, at least like not without major consequences. Like someone in this movie, we have like one token character who puts two and two together and like finds out who he is just by putting two and two together. Um, he runs the risk of that becoming a regular occurrence, especially when like you have to fund Batman. Like you're a billionaire, you have the money to do it, but eventually the wrong people are going to start noticing the more and more you have to do it.
Yeah. And so I think it's just a brave choice on this movie to commit to that and like to end with, yeah, Batman's just gotta, like, even beyond just the whole sacrificing himself to keep Dent's image alive, when we come back in Rises and he hasn't been active for that time, it feels a little sad, but it also makes perfect sense. It's like, honestly, what could we expect? And here we
Him
have
do
the
it
famous pencil
try
trick.
to keep cleaning up the city. But apparently, the city didn't even need cleaning up after the events of this movie, which I'm not entirely sure that I buy. But that's a discussion for when we get to Rises.
Yeah, that's true.
And of course, the famous Heath Ledger delivering just a mind blowing performance. And his death is a real tragedy that um, I think fundamentally changes what they wanted to do with Rises. Um, because I'm pretty sure he was supposed to be a part of that movie if they were to make one. Like I said, Nolan wasn't even completely committed to doing a third, but he knew he wanted to keep using Heath if they were to do it.
Yeah. And like his death like elevates the way that people discuss this movie around when it comes out and discuss his performance. And like let me just say, this is the first thing I see him in, but I've yet to see him in anything that I don't love him in, and he's got a heck of a range. Or like he can do this, he can be the lead in A Knight's Tale, he can do 10 Things I Hate About You, and like he was just a real talent and like a talented performer, and it so sucks that he had to go before his time.
And it remains iconic to this day. Like damn near every bit of line that he has, damn near all his dialogue has been quoted, memeified. Like from the time he's first steps on screen till the last time we see him, this performance and like what he did in this film has been entrenched in our pop culture.
Yeah. And like part of that is the performance, absolutely, but I also don't want to just undersell the way that it's written because I think a lot of the dialogue in this movie is super memorable. And granted, I'm biased because I've seen it as often as I have, but there's so many lines, just like little innocuous lines by like one-off characters that's like memorable to me. And this is just a really well-written movie with lots of good dialogue all around. So you give some of that to a performer like Ledger, and he makes it 10 times as memorable and quotable. And like also a channel that uh, like I suppose I'd call a colleague of mine, Full Fat Videos, just today, as we're recording this, released a video about Joker in this movie and how this movie functions as an origin story. And they make a point that I don't entirely agree with, which they were talking about the scene that just ended and how when the Joker says, if you're good at something, never do it for free, it's like Batman begins this movie as a job for the Joker. And I don't think that's true. I think when he says, if you're good at something, never do it for free, he's not being remotely honest and he's just trying to convince all of the other criminals that he's like on their level. Even as early as this first scene, I don't think he's remotely interested in money.
Well, I don't think we have enough to go on to glean that. You can certainly glean that, when we have the whole movie as a full picture. We're just seeing this for the first time. You don't know enough about his motivations to really say whether he does or doesn't care about money.
Yeah, no, but in retrospect, definitely.
Yeah, come back, yeah, for sure. Um, the pencil trick was a really nice way of like a really nice clean way of doing something effective and graphic in a PG-13 movie.
Yeah, that's all over this movie, where stuff that's not actually on screen is like just off screen or it's not visualized in a very bloody or gory way still feels very visceral and painful.
Even just something as simple as the Joker shooting people, but they're off frame, like they're not in the frame. Like when
Mm.
he's in the hospital and he shoots the guy with the silencer, or later when he's in the truck and he shoots I think the police officer that stops them, and it's just a hard cut. Stuff like that's really effective. I remember before the movie was on DVD, hearing my friends talk about how their parents were complaining that this movie was so visceral and violent, that they felt like really uncomfortable taking their kids to see it, even though there's not really any blood.
Yeah. And right now, we're still at the stage of this movie where Joker hasn't like formally announced himself to the public yet. So like Gordon is aware of him and he's made Bruce aware of him, but he's not like on their radar. So this is still just business as usual for him. So it's nice to get this little stretch of the movie where it's Batman just kind of doing what Batman do until the Joker really just completely disrupts everything.
Um, I don't know about you, but I'm watching the IMAX version, where like it cuts to certain scenes and shots that were filmed in IMAX. Um, Honestly, like for early 2000s, before we get to I want to say it was, oh yeah, it was Infinity War. Avengers Infinity War is the first movie, at least first Western movie, like here in the States, to be filmed entirely in IMAX.
Ah,
Um, every other movie before that would only film scenes in IMAX. And if you ever can get the version that has IMAX digitally, or I guess Blu-ray. I don't know if Blu-rays do that or not. I know Transformers does it. It's really annoying in the most recent live action Transformers movie. Um, Last night, not Bumblebee, where they cut in and out, and it's really disorienting. I hate when movies shift aspect ratio. Um, if if you can't have it one way the whole movie, then just don't film it that way. At least that's how I feel. I hate it when we switch aspect ratio. I don't
yeah,
mind if it's full screen or wide, but you need to pick one, and that needs to be just what the movie looks like for the whole film.
yeah. That said, we're at this scene, and this isn't something I don't think I think about as I'm watching it for the first time, but it's definitely such a ooh yeah like that. That's that kind of thing. It's off screen, but like your mind fills in the blanks, and it's so ooh. But
Yeah,
the way that this backstory is given, and it's such a smart choice to give him this very sort of tragic backstory, and have it go, huh? Well, I suppose that's interesting, and it would explain how he got so messed up. And then later, we find out he's just making stuff off the top of his head, and that's even worse. It's like, okay, so we really can't take anything that he says at face value.
and I think this movie was really smart, and particularly Christopher Nolan and David Goyer, in just going the less is more route. Give us a Joker who doesn't have a backstory, or at least
Mhm.
one that we don't get to see, and just let him be mysterious.
Yeah. Again, to reference the full fat video, uh, they make a decent point that if you want to take one of his lines about like a truck full of soldiers being blown up to be like, oh, did that happen to him? That would explain how he has some of the expertise that he does. You could take it that way, or you could just take that to be another thing that he's just listing off at random. The movie lets you kind of attempt to read into things that he says, but it never gives you anything definitive.
And that's just really effective. It just makes him that much more menacing and mysterious. I like this. Well, actually, I think we have a while before we get to Bruce. Well, no, because this is the whole setup for that scene where Bruce shows up as Batman.
Yeah, where he uses
I
sonar
think
like
this
a
scene is
submarine.
Yeah, and I think this scene we're about to get to is really really important for this story, um, and it helps this movie stand alone. Um, because for the majority of this movie, like, even though Batman is physically superior, Joker is so smart and cunning, and for the majority of this movie, Batman is just trying to play catch up, trying to stop this guy. And we need to see this Batman in his element and winning. because he's gonna spend a lot of this movie losing. And like we
Yeah.
need to know what the difference is between what Bruce is used to, what he's comfortable with, and the complete and utter foreign tidal wave that is the Joker that he's gonna have to deal with after this.
Yeah, and like having Lau be based in Hong Kong is such a big part of that because if he's just another Gotham criminal, it can feel like, okay, Batman's got Gotham on lock, but if anything comes from outside of that, then who knows how well he can do. This is, however briefly, this movie indulging in like the memeified I'm Batman of it all, where you can literally go to another country and just seamlessly grab this guy with hardly any trouble. And so that gives us something that Begins doesn't, which is almost overkill, just how cool and efficient and like unstoppable he is.
And you can really feel the James Bond influence in not only this scene, but kind of with Nolan in general, because he's talked at length about how much he loves the Bond movies and how um, they've influenced a number of ideas that he's had for these Batman movies.
Hmm.
Speaking of which, how familiar are you with Bond?
Not super. I've watched a lot of them. I don't believe there are many outside of Skyfall that I've watched more than twice. Like Spyfall and Casino Royale, I've watched both a couple of times each. Other than that, I've watched The Spy Who Loved Me twice. I've watched You Only Live twice, once. A bunch of them I've only watched the once.
The action's already significantly better here.
Yes, agreed.
Um, for me, as far as Bond goes, I've literally only seen all the Daniel Craig films.
Ah, okay. Could
I
you
love that they
imagine?
don't even give us the subtitles for that. Like, for him, that's just noise.
Could you imagine this guy just comes in, steals your boss, and gets the heck out? It's like it's
Yeah,
nothing to him.
yeah. This is just another day for Batman, or another night, more accurately.
I'm Batman.
Yeah, but this is peak of Batman, like in his element. He's in control, and like he understands criminals. Um, and he's about to go up against someone he just does not understand, and like that he's had no real preparation for. Nothing can really prepare you for someone like the Joker.
Yeah, and that also believably like turns the screws on all the cops because even as they've gotten better at like getting at the criminals, they still can't touch people like Lau without Batman's help. So that makes Batman like their safety net. So as soon as Joker shows up and Batman's not ready for him, that's also when things get infinitely worse for Gordon and Harvey.
Um, and that's also how you're able to buy Batman actually kind of openly working with the police. Because like in an earlier scene, like we saw Batman just talking to the commissioner in the vault, and the commissioner just dismisses one of his deputies, and actually he's not even commissioner yet. I keep calling him commissioner.
He's still
Um, yeah, but he sends his subordinates away, and like they know Batman's there, and like the relationship they have, and like
uh-huh.
the back signal and where it comes from is kind of public knowledge, even though no one really talks about it. Um, So it's interesting that we have that in such a more realistic context.
Hmm.
This is also one of those movies where if I'm with friends and we're scrolling through my movie list and um, people are trying to figure out what to pick out of all the options I have, and I just instead of waiting for a vote, I just pick Dark Knight. There's like no protest.
Which, I mean, if anyone does protest, shame on them. What do they think they're doing?
I've already seen it. Well, there's value in revisiting movies.
Yeah. We haven't talked about these guys played by Eric Roberts and all these other guys as like just the sort of common mob bosses and criminals. They are pretty minor roles, but these actors are giving them like enough character to be memorable. Like these parts could have been super dismissible and super like forgettable amongst all of the other great performances and characterization in this movie. But like I come out of this movie remembering all these guys too. Like they're great.
Yeah, we build up the law enforcement only to knock them right back down when Joker
Yeah,
starts putting his plans in motion.
in this scene at that, and I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure it's a scene. Yeah,
Batman's winning, the police are winning, everyone is now in a good place. And as soon as the mayor turns around and walks over to that window,
and
it
it's
just
it's
goes.
such a great shift because up to now we assume that whatever plans Joker has relies on these guys, and if he's not working for them, he's trying to get them in some way to work for him. So with all of them behind bars or like on their way to being behind bars, you're thinking like, what is this movie almost over already? Then it's like, no, Joker does not need them. He's got his own whole thing going on. This is like ridiculously dark.
Yeah. And even worse is the eventual video that we're about to see.
Mm. I like that on the card. Will the real Batman please stand up?
You know something?
What?
That's I literally never noticed that. So,
Nah.
so what people say, why do you rewatch movies all the time? Well, when you go back, there are often things that you find and you notice that you literally never noticed before.
Yeah. And like this, he doesn't play as much beyond like having the makeup. This is not a Joker who plays a lot into the clown aspect, but he is still just genuinely funny.
Oh yeah, this is an absolutely hysterical Joker, which I think is really important.
Hmm.
You as sadistic as this character is, he needs to be able to get genuine laughs out of the audience.
Yeah. And like we were talking about how much levity there is in Begins, and for as much as Roz was a very personal enemy to Bruce, Joker really pushes everyone else in the cast to a really dark place. And so they get to have less levity amongst themselves, but it doesn't feel as bad because the source of all that darkness, the Joker, is also the source of his own levity. So it's a very different kind of humor than what Begins was doing, but it's still as entertaining.
Yes, it still works. It's kind of crazy. This movie's long, like 2.5 hours long, and um, it feels like it's flying by. We're already at this scene where we're eventually about to get our first Joker and Batman confrontation.
Yeah, we're like 44 minutes in, and I feel like I blinked, like we just started. You have no.
But yeah, this is the big scene that I think needed to be seriously reworked. If you're gonna, because this is a sequel to Begins, and after shunning some of the very same people who are undoubtedly also at this benefit, um, like disrespecting him the way he does and telling them all to leave his birthday bash, and then, as far as they know, gets drunk and burns down his own house afterwards. This is not a guy that they would at all respect or take because it hasn't even been that long since Begins. Um, and I this is not the guy that they respect his opinion and his endorsement of this guy as the DA. Like realistically, I just don't buy that a- anyone, especially people of his class, take him seriously after the ending of the last movie.
I'm really torn because, on the one hand, I understand exactly where you're coming from, and yet also, on the other hand, like in real life, not to the extreme of burning down their own house, but rich people have done and said some very like stupid and hurtful things like amongst their own circles, and it seems like you kind of just get a slap on the wrist by the rest of the upper class whenever that happens. And so I'm not sure, like part of this doesn't feel realistic at all, and part of it feels almost too realistic. Like, of course I would buy that a bunch of rich people in Gotham City would, assuming that Bruce Wayne still has all of his own money and like builds his house back up, would just go right back to being kind of sycophantic and be like, okay, whatever. This guy is throwing a rich person party in his house. I'm just gonna go to that. Why not?
But not just that. This is an endorsement for um, somebody who's going to be a major part of their judicial system, their DA.
True, but then that might also be they like Harvey already.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess like if they know at all what Harvey's been doing, um, they come to this benefit regardless of who's throwing it. But just the fact that everyone is clearly behind Bruce and listening to everything he's saying when he goes on this whole speech and full endorsement, it's like, yeah, great, buddy, but I mean, last movie still happened. Like you still were super disrespectful to a huge chunk. It's got to be a huge chunk of the same people that are still in that room and burn down your own house.
Yeah. And like the tension of this sequence is ridiculous.
Yeah, it just makes your hair stand up.
Oof.
And just by the because I think this isn't exactly Joker's theme, but just in the score, Hans Zimmer is slowly building.
Yeah. And like this whole thing with the envelope is just mean.
Oh, up! That's hysterical. it's just funny. Like it's awful and sadistic, but it's hilarious. Like she has no idea what the heck that means, and they just boom.
Yep. She's probably thinking, are they pulling my leg right now? Yeah, that face she makes, like, what kind of trick are you playing on me right now? But yeah,
Oh,
this is really the way that he makes all this stuff happen at the same time. This is the real moment where Joker's not just like scary and off putting. He's like, oh no, this guy is a problem.
yeah, it's a real mastermind. Because like you're gonna have a lot of the major police force scattered about the city dealing with both of those things, while you're here trying to find Dent and presumably kill him. Like he was probably gonna kill him here at this party. I mean that makes sense. Like he doesn't want his senses impeded while he's handling a gun and trying to find somebody. But um,
It also
yeah,
just
that's
looks kind of silly.
it's just super goofy to just throw the alcohol out and pretend like you're drinking it. I guess we're not allowed. Okay, great.
Hey, it's Senator Leahy.
And the crazy thing is, like, I don't know if that's even true.
Yeah, he could just still be saying nonsense.
I don't even know what to say here. It's hard not to just watch this man work.
Yeah. Although, like, respect for Rachel to just, like, being the one person to be like, okay, knock it off. And, like, she's doing something neat here where she's very clearly actually scared, but she's trying not to let it show on her face.
Yeah, she's trying to be as emotionless as possible.
And it's so uncanny the way that, as a viewer, you're processing the fact that, okay, so I can't trust what he's saying, but at the same time, he's really selling this monologue the same way that he
Yeah,
sold the last one.
like he himself genuinely believes this in the moment.
And so that was only a quick line, but like we mentioned as we were talking about in Begins, the voice does feel a little bit more overdone in this movie. And like it's not a big problem, but it does sort of like it grabs my attention this time in a way it didn't with Begins.
It can. I mean, it's certainly unintentionally goofy. Um, I mean, like in the moment, like I'm not like laughing at the movie just because Batman's talking, but just like it's easily make funnable, like Bane's voice. I mean, it's nowhere near as bad as Bane's voice, but it is that same thing of like you can easily make fun of that.
Yeah, no. And it's like coming off the last movie, it's easy to see how it feels a little bit more over the top. And this is something that Kat mentioned in his review of this movie. This is maybe the weirdest thing is that they both fall on this car, and then what happens with the Joker upstairs? We kind of just move on.
Yeah, this is the only bit of weird editing where it feels like something got cut
Yeah.
because it's like what do you mean? You gotta assume like there, you know, like we can't find Harvey. Let's leave before the cops show up. Um, but you know, maybe we should show that.
Yeah, it'd take you 5 seconds. And like I talked about how like perfect Harvey is, But it's worth noting that one of the things that makes him so admirable is also something that we realistically paint as like a flaw, which is that when met with opposition, he just doubles down like ludicrously hard. So all this stuff happens, and his instinct is to just go in even harder. And like
Yeah,
that,
just press loud harder for information.
yeah, and that like stubbornness that he has is going to also be the root of a lot of really bad things that he does.
And then, like again, this movie riddled with iconic lines. Some men just
This
want to
whole
watch the
monologue,
world burn. Yeah,
and like it's unfortunate that even after this speech, like Bruce doesn't quite get it, and he's gonna
yeah.
spend the whole movie like coming to terms with just the kind of person that the Joker is.
Like he can't beat this guy because he just doesn't understand this guy. He understood Ross and he understood Crane and he understands like the fundamental mindset of the basic criminal. But this is completely foreign to him. This completely anarchic, like anti-establishment, anti-society sociopath is the mindset of
And
someone like this is completely foreign to him.
yeah, and it's also in the way that it relates to him. Because again, tying back to how we set him up at the end of last movie, Joker is a response to Batman. And so no one in like the currently existing criminal like system of Gotham knew how to respond to Batman because he's something new and unprecedented. Batman doesn't know how to respond to Joker because he is a response to that unprecedented thing. And when Joker's like, you complete me, and later on, like I foresee us doing this forever, like that's also part of what Bruce doesn't get is that he doesn't understand that this is someone who specifically wants to target him, not in like I want to kill him way, but in this thing that we do is fun way, and that doesn't make any sense to him.
I would like to have some kind of confirmation that the Joker does not actually start doing this until we see Batman, because you say the Joker is a response to Batman, and that could be true, or it just could just literally be convenient timing. Like he just doesn't show up until a few months after Batman has shown up. But I would like some hard proof or evidence that Joker does not decide to do what he does until after seeing like Batman and him having operated for a while, and that it is in fact a direct response to what he's been doing. Because who knows?
True.
Like I like that we don't have a straight up origin for this Joker. Um, it's like who knows what he was before he became what he became, but or like when he developed this notion that society and humanity, like that's all a lie, it's all a facade that we have constructed to make ourselves feel comfortable and safe. um this is really cool. You almost never see this in the average superhero movie where someone has to maintain an identity, somebody just finding out about it by putting two
Yeah.
and two together.
And when you do, it's always someone that you know you can trust. Like
Yeah,
someone finds out the identity, but it's fine because they're a good guy and they're a friend. And like I love the way that he does this. Like he doesn't confirm or deny anything. He's just like, let me lay out for you right now what you think you're doing. And like convinces him to back off.
yeah. So your plan is to blackmail this guy, one of the wealthiest people in the world. Like this whole thing is perfect.
Not just one of the wealthiest people in the world, but if you're correct, he's also someone who goes around beating people up nightly, and you think he won't come after you?
I like that we also give Lucius some opposition to Batman in this movie towards the end, where he has to resort to using arguably really like it's like morally he has to use some pretty deplorable tactics to try to find Joker because the situation is so dire. It's like fundamentally like spying on literally the entire day to try to find someone who is close to or knows the Joker, like where he
Yeah.
is is wrong. But desperate times, desperate messages, and that's what he has to do.
And it's unfortunate that like 12 years later, we're living in a world where this happens. So, like, not often isn't the right word, but like we are in that era where everyone is being spied on, and we all kind of know it, but we just kind of accept it as a fact of life, and no one really opposes it too much because what are we honestly going to do? And like it kind of
Yeah,
sucks that in that time we've just this thing that we
you
still
have to live
know
with
is
it.
terrible, we just kind of go with it. I forgot that this scene was this early.
This scene leads to, I think, eventually leads to one of my favorite bits of levity in the movie. Or no, it might be later. Yeah, it's definitely later because Bruce is driving his Ferrari and he crashes it to save
Yeah,
Gordon.
we're not quite there yet.
I love the intensity of this sequence and like making the Joker um a menace and terrifying in broad daylight. And that we have so many of Joker scenes during the day because it's like Batman is, the figure that always comes out at night, but Joker is the figure that like rules the day when Batman's not there.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of a horror movie. I'm forgetting the name of it, but it was like I remember the director talking in like behind the scenes little featurette about how he wanted his horror movie. He wanted to make you just afraid of daylight as you would be of the dark, and
Mm.
I think that's really effective with the Joker in this film.
And like the fact that he comes out in the daytime is also a bit of like another big advantage that he has over Batman is that he doesn't have to worry about a secret identity at all. So while Bruce has to dedicate at least some time to like putting on the Bruce Wayne act so that people don't suspect he's Batman, Joker can literally just spend 24/7 doing what he needs to get done.
Yeah, there is no having to maintain a double life. Joker is all he is. I was not at all calling the twist of Gordon not even really being dead here. I
You
remember
worried?
that at least, like as a kid on first viewing. Like no, I definitely wasn't calling that. Especially because I was
Yeah.
kind of like you at that age. Like I wasn't actively critiquing films. Um, and honestly, like this is a thing even with me. Like today, I don't actively try to predict what is going to happen next as I watch a thing. I mean, I
And
can make predictions once I've finished an episode of a show or something, or like a movie in an ongoing series. But I'm not someone who's trying to pick apart every plot point where I like think like a dozen moves ahead. Like, what's this character going to do here, and all that stuff. I just kind of experience the story as it goes.
yeah, it's probably also helpful that we likely weren't into Batman enough to have that moment of like, oh wait, but you can't kill him. He's not even the commissioner yet.
Oh, that's brilliant editing. I love that. God help whoever he does want to talk to. Cut to this sleaze bag.
Which, I mean, hey, if you need someone to play a sleazebag, Eric Roberts is not a bad choice.
No, he is not.
I primarily know him, like, I know that he has a very lengthy, like, list of roles, but, like, I primarily know him for this and for playing the Master in the 1996 Doctor Who movie, where he was literally a liquid snake for part of that, so
That sounds so hilarious.
it's pretty goofy, I'm not gonna lie.
This is so this is so sweet and endearing. Like, of course, like I spent I'm definitely more attached to Bruce as a character in this movie, but even still, like they've done a great job of endearing me to Harvey. I really care about him and Rachel, and you don't want anything to happen to. One of my favorite things about this movie is how we kind of have a love triangle, but it's not really a love triangle, and there's none of that cheap, forced kind of CW-esque drama with it. Like you care about everybody involved. No one's thrown under the bus for the sake of any other particular character.
Yeah. And like again, we are coming off of Begins with kind of this acceptance that if Bruce is going to be Batman, then he and Rachel can't work. And when he gets to have that like hope that like Harvey is the guy who's going to make a Gotham that doesn't need Batman, we kind of feel bad for him because we know that's probably not how things are going to shake out.
This scene that this scene is a shattering disillusionment for Batman because like we see in the first movie that he threatens to drop Flask all the way to the bottom. He actually goes through with it there, and like it looked like really hurting that guy's ankles
Yeah.
from dropping it from that height. And we see that like he just can't go far enough. Um, because of his morality and the rules he's laid out for himself, he he's learning that Batman is very, very limited, and that he just might not be able to stop this guy. This guy that doesn't even have the years of training, the money, or just the resources that he in fact has, and yet Joker has instilled this fear in people that there's not a soul in the city that would be willing to cross Joker for anyone, not even Batman.
And that's another way in which Joker is kind of like the perfect successor to Roz as an antagonist, where Roz would be the guy who says, "You're not going far enough. Like, this just threatening violence or threatening to kill people is only going to get you so far. You've got to actually do it at some point if you want to make a change." And Joker is the guy who just straight up does that. And he doesn't even, again, he doesn't have the pretense of like needing to stay in the shadows. Like he's sneaky and he doesn't want to be in broad daylight in the sense that like people can just spot him wherever. He does like he takes off his makeup when he needs to like blend into a crowd, but he will just straight up go to people and sort of impress that fear on them directly. Whereas that's something he has over Bruce and something he had over Roz, where he is kind of what Roz would want just taken to its natural extreme, and Bruce is not ready for that.
Yeah, there's literally nothing he won't do.
Mm. And like the way that Harvey was unraveling in that scene, it's like you'd leave a man's life to chance, and like we know late, like looking back, that that's not what he's doing. but he because Rachel's life is at stake, he's really starting to lose it already.
He's willing to go that far. And yeah, I like that we don't show that until much later. But that coin is the exact same. The size on it are exactly the same. And technically, you're still cheating on Harvey, but I get it. I don't know why you're even entertaining that when you've already made your choice.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a weird line. Maybe she's just saying it for his sake because she knows that's what he
Yeah, like
wants.
she just doesn't want him to let himself get arrested over it when she doesn't think it's going to change anything.
Yeah. But it's like we're at this weird stalemate where both of them seem to be pretty conscious of the fact that them together is not going to happen. And they're kind of just dancing around that fact.
Well, Bruce, he talked to her earlier at the party and said, Harvey's the guy. Like, Harvey is the guy that I've been waiting for to where I can finally step back and just have a normal life again.
True,
Um,
but then immediately the Joker shows up and things change, and now he's like, I gotta turn myself into the police.
but at the same time, like the last thing that he said to Rachel, before that scene we just saw was like Harvey's the guy who can make the city better without wearing a mask, without being Batman. Now we can do this. Now we can pursue this relationship. And the fact that she entertains that when she's already in a relationship with Harvey is the only like major super questionable thing as far as the whole dynamic between these three goes.
Yeah, that
Like the
said,
the spy thing I kind of understand, even though that is still cheating on Harvey. Like she thinks that he's about to turn himself in and that she's probably never gonna see him again. So I get that, but going as far as to entertain Bruce being with you when you're not available, you're already with somebody else. Like that's awkward and weird and
yeah. Although I suppose you could think about it like she's thinking about would I be willing to like break up with Harvey if Bruce suddenly becomes available? And to her credit, I think she's thinking no. Where like even in that scene, after Bruce explains it, I think she's still coming from the place of like, okay, that's great, and maybe earlier I would have like jumped at the chance, but like I've got something here, and we can't exactly like act like nothing has changed. And like we talked over it, but I love Bruce's line of like accomplice. I'm gonna tell them all this was your idea with Alfred.
yeah, that was great. Again, little nuggets like that, like levity, even in a movie this heavy, I think is really important, and they're definitely overlooked anytime anyone talks about this film. But especially when you go back and watch it, I think it definitely does help with just keeping the pacing. I mean, overall, it's still a pretty dark, somber, serious movie, but it does help with lighting the load a little bit for your audience. And see, I think Rachel could have been made to change her mind and actually choose Bruce over Harvey until that scene we just saw and what she's saying to Bruce now.
Mm-hmm.
Because Bruce is standing by and letting Harvey take the hit for him and letting Harvey, just falsely admit to being Batman on live TV and get taken away from the cops. Like that that seals the fate. Or like there's no question now. Like before
Yeah.
that, I could have totally seen her still choosing Bruce, but after Bruce made that majorly morally questionable decision, um, she's like, yeah, maybe like Bruce is still a good person and his heart's in the right place. Um, but like for her, Harvey is an objectively better person and probably a healthier person for her to be with.
Yeah. And like he just laid it out right now. They do like Harvey has a plan and he's kind of hoping that Batman will just follow along, like go along with it, that he's gonna get transferred and Batman will show up to intercept the Joker when he comes after him in transit. But that is still
That's a huge
that,
gamble.
yeah. And like it's a gamble where Harvey's putting himself at risk and Bruce comparatively is not.
Comparatively now, but like at least like she still knows that Bruce is Batman, so it's and he's a human being. Like I mean, he's trained for this kind of thing, and he has a lot of resources, and his armor is bulletproof-ish to a degree, but like he could very well still die in this altercation.
And that was another like shot off frame.
Really visceral scene,
Whoop,
and yet
it's
it's
going down.
so effective. I never would have thought about the irony of this before, but I remember I want to say it was either one of the filmmakers or one of the screenwriters talking about this scene, like seeing the fire truck on fire. Like that's supposed to be an inherently like ha funny thing for Joker. It's like let's light a fire truck on fire and
I
use
never
that to
even
block their
noticed that it was a fire truck.
yeah, that's a fire truck.
Oof.
This is a really fun chase scene.
Yes. Slaughter is the best medicine.
That's so Joker.
That's one of those things I could see someone missing. Don't jinx it. He has something a lot bigger.
Is that a bazooka? Oh, that's great. This is so great.
I mean, technically you did sign up for it, but
I gotta ask you because we're about to get it here soon. This is like one of the big major things the movie was sold on. Uh, like the bat cycle that like pops out of the Batmobile. Um, wow, that's a really cool shot. But yeah, how do you feel about Batman's second um kind of vehicular mode coming out of the Batmobile that was not
I
at
don't
all
know
used
what
in
to
the first
say
film?
about it beyond the fact that it's ridiculously cool.
Um, I mean, yeah, if you're going if you want to be like super nitpicky, like that's 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 just that couldn't really work for how the Batmobile just for how that car is well that tank I guess I should say is actually designed like you physically could not do that but it is cool it's a cool mechanism I like it a lot
But
I
hey,
like that
he jumped his vehicle in front of a bazooka to take the fire. Your argument is invalid.
I like that it can switch like he rides up a wall and he's able to switch the access of it that's pretty
Yeah,
cool
that's so cool.
but one thing I really like about it it feels like a like very much a Batman mechanism. Like we know that the tank was initially for the army, and that does not at all feel like something the army would build in.
You
That
know
feels like
what? Yeah,
something
that's true. Maybe
that
he
feels
had
like
like
something
modifications
really
made.
yeah, he had Lucius some modifications to it. So like for whatever reason he wanted to pop from the Batmobile and just go to straight up riding like a cycle. He could do that.
Yeah. And I mean, he's gonna need another new one anyway, so. It really doesn't occur to you just how little the Tumblr is in this movie.
Yeah, because if I'm not mistaken, we don't like that's the last we see of it. Like Bruce doesn't have a spare lying around, at least in this movie.
Yeah, no. It gets a very short showcase and then it's just the bike.
Which makes sense because if you're gonna do a whole thing of introducing a new vehicle, you want to see him, use that. And we already got a lot of the Batmobile in the previous movie. Um,
True.
and on top of that, they used like Batman on that bike as like half the selling material for this movie. Like half the Dark Knight posters are Batman on that cycle thing.
Mm. I'm trying to imagine being the other guy in that truck with the Joker. Just like, I'm straight up not having a good time right now. Yeah, that Axis thing it does is so cool.
Yeah, that's pretty sick. And they actually dropped an 18 wheeler in the middle of Chicago and flipped it.
Yeah,
This is some Michael Bay stuff.
it's so cool. And I love that little brief reaction shot of the Joker, just like, what? It's awesome.
And he did it again. Darn, that is cool. Um, it's funny. Christopher Nolan talked about how, yeah, our team, our effects team, thought we were just gonna do this in CGI, and he was like, "No, I want it done practically." And he's like, and they were like, "Wait, what? We don't know how to do that." And he was like, "Well, it's your job. Figure that shit out." So they actually did it, and it looks great. And this is another really iconic sequence. Him just standing in the middle of the street with a with an automatic gun.
Ah, ooh, that little he gives.
I mean, he gives interesting little nuances all over this movie. That is epic.
Yeah.
I think it was an interesting choice to drop pretty much all score out of that entire sequence. Like that scores that scene's not really scored at all.
Yeah, no. Compare it to like the chase and begins, where that's like the theme is playing throughout that, and it's like it's really intense. It's like the cycle is insanely cool, but that's way less of a cool factor scene. And like again, it's really unfortunate in retrospect of like this was our brief moment of sort of like victory, and as soon as he gets in that car, like the victory is already over. Dent is off to the next big problem.
Yeah, it was. And what we've come to find out is it was never even really a victory. The Joker planned on getting caught.
Mm.
Like, even if Batman hadn't shown up, presumably he somehow would have gotten his people to take Harvey, but just let himself get taken.
Yeah.
And he's finally Commissioner Gordon, so I don't have to keep correcting myself when I call him that.
Yeah, first couple of times I watched this, I didn't realize that he wasn't already commissioner, and I thought that he was just referring to him by title to like congratulate him. It took me a while to realize like that's the scene where he becomes commissioner. I feel bad for this guy.
I liked that bit of him clapping along with everybody else when Gordon
Yeah.
gets promoted to commissioner. Improv, and they decided to just shoot him doing that. That was not scripted, just more excellence from Heath Ledger.
Yeah. And it's also like perfectly like fitting for the fact that he knows that this is all just like a pretense to his plan coming into motion.
Yeah, he's just biding his time.
And like this thing that we do with the lights and like Batman behind him is great.
Oh, we're finally at my favorite scene in the movie.
Yeah.
And what is so interesting about really just stories in general, especially movies based around these iconic characters and heroes that we love so much, is often the most compelling, dynamic, and interesting scenes isn't even a big, flashy, or well choreographed action scene. It's two people talking.
Hmm.
Like this, the scene I constantly go back to, um, from season 2 of Daredevil, Punisher and Matt having a conversation in a grave for like 10 minutes.
And like even the episode before that one where it's them on the rooftop.
Yeah, that one's also great.
Uh, one spot or several.
Several.
You could be over there and over there, over there.
This this is a really great scene because we really get a a more of a not necessarily a deep dive, but we have Joker. Joker is, at least for the most part, telling the truth about his philosophy in this scene
Yeah.
and like the root of his motivations. It's like, yeah, when the chips are down, people are just all horrible. Everybody is just another me. They just need to be pushed hard enough.
Yeah.
I don't know how not to just watch this scene.
Yeah, it's really hard to do commentary because I just want to watch the scene. Yeah, he's still stuck in like I think I know who this guy is, and in the end he just wants another payoff. And honestly, at this point, I'm just going, Bruce, there's probably more to it than that. This guy, people don't go this far if they just want a paycheck.
And Joker is so interesting because he doesn't like no Batman, but he does know him. Like he sees through that immediately. He's like, don't talk like one of them. You're not.
Yeah. Like a normal person doesn't dress up in a bat suit and like go to this extreme either.
And this is when this is when he starts cracking
Yeah.
under the pressure.
And like again, we talked about with Begins sort of like how you could have a more heightened universe coming after that movie, and like Nolan just doesn't choose to go that route. I think you could make a similar kind of argument for this and like the point Joker is making, where it's like I'm just ahead of the curve, where he's like
I really don't.
not in the sense of like a more heightened, but like when people like Bane start showing up, I could see a version of the more grounded like Batman villains like popping up after this film in the sense of Joker's like you've changed things like crime and like law and order the way that it used to be. There's no going back now. Like we have you and we have me, and like there will be more after us. And like people are just gonna keep escalating and escalating and going crazier and crazier. And like normal mob boss crime stuff is not going to be the status quo from here on out.
What's so unfortunate is when Joker finally gives him the information. I think deep down because he saw that Batman swooped to her rescue last time they encountered each other, that like he's toying with them, and he feels pretty confident that he's gonna try to save Rachel and let the police go after Dent. So he just switches where they are. Although he couldn't really know which that Batman would get there first versus the police not being able to get to Rachel in time. Um, well, I guess that's the whole point of where they were both placed and the amount of time that they have on the bombs. Because like the whole point is you'll have to choose. But I don't know, when you have two different people going towards both, I don't know. Like this is a Joker that has everything planned out to like the T. I'm sure he even took like traffic into account and things like that. Um, but I don't know. I wonder about it. I'm
Yeah.
not even saying it's a problem, but it's something interesting to think about.
This guy is incredibly memorable for a guy who's only really in this scene.
Oh yeah, I remember him as the guy Joker kills after the interrogation scene. That's really funny.
Oh,
Like it really should not be like, but that's the lovable contradiction with a character like Joker is.
yeah.
He's sadistic, evil, and twisted, but he's genuinely funny.
Hmm. And like clearly he's good enough that this guy who's like big tough guy, he just does away with him pretty easily, it seems like.
I don't even really see that guy as being big and tough. Kind of has like a dad bod, but he's easily able to get under his skin, and Joker
Yeah.
takes advantage of him.
Oh, Harvey. See, you got no one to blame but yourself for this.
I think he's like still secure and just blaming Joker because he wouldn't
But
have
I,
been there in the first place.
true, but I
Um,
mean specifically the getting it all over his face part. Ugh. And like that whole looking at the lips was not planned. That's like just a result of the makeup job, and yet it's so great for the character.
Yeah, I heard it was because it really dried out his mouth.
Yeah.
But it does also work as an interesting like little tick. And again, it just breathes an inherent realism to the performance because he also applied all of his own makeup. I don't know if this is a. I'm curious to see what this Two Face would have looked like if he continued. Because, like I said, this is definitely like a solid take on Harvey Dent. Um, but Two Face is, I mean, because of the Harvey side, he's more sympathetic than I've ever seen him. Um, at the same time, though, like we don't get a ton of Two Face in this movie, so I'm just curious what established Two Face looks like
I
coming out
feel
of.
like after this movie, we get a Two Face who like continues to target corrupt cops.
But that's kind of weird because I mean that's a hard stop reinvention of the character, and he's. I mean, yeah, obviously he'd still be on Batman's radar, and Batman would still want to take him down just because he's killing people. But um, he's not the traditional, um, kind of more traditional criminal that he is in the comics.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like with all of the setup that we give him in this movie, like a Two Face who's eventually like a mob boss in his own right and like trying to get like cash and stuff. I don't think we ever get that guy. I just don't think he develops into that person at all.
Well, it's interesting you say that because since its inception, he's always been a former DA. Um, but hell, maybe in previous incarnations, still he was still a dirty member of law enforcement.
Mm. It's just in this one we really emphasize like it's the corruption and the fact that like so many cops are easily bought out that really creates a majority of his problems, and he's targeting like the specific ones that like were paid off by the Joker, like Wirtz and Ramirez, and like with as single like as laser focused as he is on that, assuming that he lives past the ending of this movie, I feel like that continues to be his MO just for like the whole Gotham PD.
Um,
Personally, I
killing Rachel was another one of my favorite choices in this movie. That was immensely powerful for me as a kid. Um, to not only watch the hero fail so epically, but like losing the love interest. Um, like this is pre Amazing Spider-Man 2. Like it's the first time I've ever really seen that.
yeah, me too. It's also one of the first times that I can recall seeing a character die like mid sentence. Like that caught me off guard.
And this letter is really, really hurtful. Um, I don't. I kind of go back and forth on whether or not I like the choice of Alfred keeping the letter from him. Especially when we get to Rises, and he reveals that he got that letter from Rachel, but since he burned it and he doesn't have proof, and like the way he talks about it, it sounds like he's lying. Like it's something that he's literally making up just to get Bruce to step back and do what he wants. And it's really unfortunate because like if you're Bruce and you don't know that it's true, it really sounds like Alfred's lying in that scene, and like it's weird, but that's how his delivery kind of plays, at least to
Yeah, that's
me.
how I always felt about it. And I don't know. I've never really given too much thought to like the decision in the context of this movie, but I really wonder how much, if anything, would have actually changed if Bruce had gotten the chance to read that for himself.
Oh, see, that's why Bruce is beating himself up here. He's like, she she chose me. She was gonna choose me over Harvey, and now she's gone. And I think, like, obviously Bruce is still gonna miss her, but that I think it takes some of the like the self-loathing off of him, and he's not beating himself up as much,
Yeah,
knowing
that
that she would have chosen somebody else.
like when he rips this thing off, it's just God.
Yeah, just genuinely tragic and just hurts to watch.
Meanwhile,
But
this idiot is just putting himself in the crosshairs. Like, what do you think you're doing?
what do you mean?
The guy who's showing up on the talk show who figured out Bruce's identity. It's like, don't go in the public with that information while Joker's like clearly targeting Batman.
Well, I mean, he had no way of knowing that Joker wouldn't have wanted the information. Um, but he's just he's coming upon some information that he knows a lot of people are going to want, and it's just kind of a get rich quick scheme for him.
Yeah. And this was the other thing that well, actually, you know what, the more I think about this, uh Captain Logan mentioned that he wasn't sure if it made sense that Two-Face would have been Harvey's nickname, but it does make sense given that, again, like so much of Gordon's office is filled with corrupt cops, and so they would look at him as being a Two-Face for not like being on their side.
Oh, for not just going along with the status quo of having
Yeah.
corrupt cops but not really saying anything. And my God,
Ugh.
that looks insanely good.
It's really, it has not aged, I don't think.
Like, we've never gotten Freddy Krueger um close to looking that good.
Yeah.
Like, we're going for a more stylized look for Freddy, at least in the original films. Um, they went the more like realistic burn victim route in the remake, which I did really like, but just seeing like his tendons and like that and whole like other half of his face, like that was completely and utterly shocking and remains one of the best effects I have ever seen. Like you
Yeah,
said,
and
it really is timeless. Like this movie came out over a decade ago, and like that doesn't look like a dated effect.
yeah, no. Oof.
And in case you had any doubts about how he really feels and what his true mission is, he burns half of his own money.
Like specific, it's his half. Like he burns all of his money, they get the rest.
But the fact that this guy has to mouth off to him and question him gets him dead.
It's about sending a message. This movie is just so cool. Like, I'm just gonna take a minute to just like say that this movie's cool.
It is. It absolutely is.
This guy is literally crapping his pants right now.
Yeah, he's completely and utterly terrified. I mean, who wouldn't be?
Much more subtle.
Oh yeah, it's a Lamborghini, not a Ferrari. Something that uh, remains really impressive with this film is, I mean, the film in general, sure, but just the overall film making. Like, we're gonna get to the hospital scene in a bit, but um, how they actually blew up a building of that size, and famously, the stunt or the explosion didn't go off like as planned, but um, Heath Ledger stayed in character, fiddling with the detonator until it finally went off.
Yeah, like that's one of those like lightning in a bottle moments of just like the actor committing until the thing happens.
I've always wanted to be an extra in a movie like this. Like, I'd get killed by the Joker.
Yeah, boy. Nah.
I would like to
I like
know.
that he doesn't react until he takes the mask off. Like, what did you think?
I'm not entirely sure who we have more to thank for the script, Goyer or Nolan, but I, if it is Goyer, then I would like to see him hop over to Marvel and write some Marvel stuff.
Yeah, you know what?
Because
That would be
I
pretty cool.
really liked what he did with the Blade movies, and a lot of stuff that he has writing credits on, I really, really like. And of course, none of this is true, Like he's
Yeah,
not really a dog chasing cars. He has a very specific agenda. Um, like in a broad sense, it is just cause chaos. Um, but he is very meticulous in how he carries that out. And what's fascinating is I do think this isn't necessarily the false backstory thing. Like he genuinely believes that he's not a guy with a plan, but he clearly is. He has a big mission statement.
yeah.
And it's interesting how Joker plays into Dent's philosophy here, and the concept of fairness and chance,
Mm-hmm.
and literally puts his own line up for forfeit with a 50-50 coin toss.
Yeah. And the thing with the messed up side of his face is that, and this is just like part of the character in any adaptation, is like you can see the normal part like internalizing and like paying attention to what Joker's saying. While on the other hand, you have like half of him that because the eyelid is gone, it always looks just like angry and intense and like crazed. So like one side of him is kind of processing and the other side is still just always in blind rage mode visually.
And you got to think like he definitely. There's no way you can know if he's going to even leave the room alive at this point. But
Yeah.
he already had the plan set in motion with the boats.
And like he's corrupted Dent like as far as he can go.
Yeah,
Like his ultimate goal was to like show that even the best person could become like that agent of chaos, and with that conversation he's got it.
yeah. Even though he doesn't kill Joker, he proceeds to kill everyone else who was involved with his abduction that night. And I think it also speaks to Harvey, at least the good natured, honorable side of him, that he actually follows through with that and doesn't just kill him anyway when he easily could have.
You could argue that that's him being good natured and honorable, and like, yeah, that's definitely a position you could take. I think you could just as easily argue it's like that's how far his mind has gone. Like that is like his broken psychosis at this point, is that it's not even about honor or like it is him being true to his word, yes, but it's also just the coin makes the decisions, not me, and that's how crazy he's gone. Yay, that's a lot.
Yeah, you only get one shot at that, so it's beyond lucky that that worked out for him. It is interesting to go back to this movie after now having two other incarnations of Joker, live action anyway. One of which obviously being terrible, and the other one was by all accounts critically acclaimed and heralded a masterpiece. And you and I have talked at length about how we like don't, or at the very least, not in love with that movie. Like I don't hate Joker, but I do think that movie is like for the most part, extremely overrated, and that's that character isn't really even Joker. Like the movie's about him, arguably getting to that point, but he's just not Joker. And I'm not necessarily saying he has to be as smart as Heath's Joker, um, but that he's kind of an idiot.
Yeah, he's
That that's not a Joker that I see coming close to outsmarting Batman.
yeah, he's not particularly smart. He's not particularly threatening, period. And it's unfortunate that for different reasons, I think the Suicide Squad Joker is much the same. And there's also, just so that we cover all our bases, there's also Gotham that did a live action Joker, even though I never actually saw that one in action. But yeah, it's unfortunate, like you said, that we've got two theatrical Jokers after this one, and both of them, like the best word for them coming off of this is like they're kind of neutered. They don't really leave too much of an impression just as characters in their own right, let alone like guys who are meant to like make you crap your pants and like make you really think about what they're saying.
Yeah, no, I'm not at all afraid of Leto's Joker. Um, Aesthetically, his Joker is just very unappealing. And then when like in just the performance, he's so like goofishly and kind of incoherently manic. Not only just in his like physical performance, but also in the dialogue and just the stuff he's saying. And it's just it feels weird for the sake of being weird. Whereas with Joker, at least here, there's more often than not a point to everything that he's saying, even if it's not true. Like it's to throw other people off and just keep him mysterious.
Yeah, Suicide Squad's Joker feels like kind of like it is not any version of this Joker, but at the same time, it feels like the memes that came out of this Joker rather than an attempt at an actual character. Where it's like people like that he's manic and unpredictable and crazy, so let's just make him that. And like people like that he's edgy, so let's add a lot of like try hard faux edge to him. And they kind of stop there and never actually make him a character.
Um, yeah, I would definitely agree with that. But we're already at the point where he's about to use the sonar.
Yeah, we're in like the last stretch of this movie. It's like what, 3/4 of the way through?
Just about, yeah. We're about to start bleeding into the third act here pretty soon, which is interesting because, like, for me as a kid, and even still kind of now as I go back to this movie, um, traditional third act should kind of end when we or at least for me, does end when we capture Joker, and then Dent is kind of this weird, like, super extended. I mean, it's not a post credit scene, but like almost like extended interlude.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's kind of like if you're not thinking about it a certain way, it can come off like a truncated sequel attached to this movie. But instead, like you have to think about it in the sense that from the beginning we're building Harvey as like like Joker will refer to him later, he's Gotham's soul. And like the real conflict of this movie is not any kind of altercation with the Joker himself. It's his real end goal, which is like poisoning the soul of Gotham, and can he be pulled back from that? Oh, you poor sap.
This is like Joker sadistic.
Yeah.
He's not lucky. Your driver.
Like, there you could tell, like, he was gonna find a way to get this guy killed no matter what.
Like I'm finding some way around this rule of mine. You will die. And it's kind of interesting to bring like a boat of convicts into it and humanize them and show that for all the horrible things that you've probably done, they still empathize with their fellow man and they're not willing to just blow the rest of these people up, even though some of them talk a big game. And it's easy to
Yeah.
do that until the real situation is staring you right in the face and you're holding the detonator in your hand.
And it's a real nice, like, layer of nuance because this movie and Begins together are very not like overly pro law enforcement because they show how easily that gets corrupted, but like they have very little sympathy for the criminal element, despite the fact that in Begins we make the point that like a lot of these guys were born into the criminal lifestyle because of circumstances that they couldn't control. It's nice to have a moment like this where we show that these guys are human and that even though this is a Batman story and it's very much about like fighting the scourge of crime, we're also not going to treat criminals like they're animals and like they're not human beings who are capable of like being selfless. I love I just saw that one guy, one of the extras, who like as soon as he hears it's the Joker, he's like, "Oh no!" and he like throws his hands over his head.
Have you thought about what you would do in this situation?
Oh boy, no, I have not. I would probably just be one of the people who's like sitting there, like just crossing my fingers, desperately praying that the other boat doesn't turn the key. I would not like make a move for it. I wouldn't say anything. I'd just go, "My name's Paul. This is between y'all." Heck, I'd probably try to jump off the boat. Oh wait, he says you can't do that, doesn't he? I might just jump off the boat and swim. Oh boy. And like the way that this pans out is interesting because they agree to take a vote, and it's like on like a surface level, you'd go like, yeah, that's the like civilized sort of way to go about it, like democratic process. And like ultimately, they vote for blowing up the other boat, and it's like, oh, you still can't quite sign off on that choice, and you feel really good when the guy ultimately can't bring himself to do it. God, the effect is so good. He couldn't deny himself the catharsis of punching her in the face.
He's probably like, I can wait. I can still do that and hopefully win this match.
And like the way that Bruce has like such immediate faith that neither ship is going to blow up the other one. Yeah, I'd be this guy. I'd be just sweating. Like, you want me to vote on what? Okay. The guilt that he feels clearly. It's like it's driving him nuts now. Oh, God. It's very hard not to just like get caught up in just watching this movie. I love that the Joker pulled the same trick twice, and it worked on everyone, viewers included, probably, with like switching out his own guys for like either civilians or the police. I'm beginning to think this might be another Spider Man 3. I'm sorry that I'm kind of like losing track of the commentary here, folks. I think I lost Malik. A lot of people have mentioned that they thought like this whole sonar vision thing that he has is kind of like this movie's equivalent to doing the straight up comic book just white eyes for the costume, which it is a really neat visual, and I'd like to see live action Batman costume try that, sort of like give him Deadpool eyes. They wouldn't be able to like motion like Deadpool's. That would probably be going a bit too far for the kind of cinematic Batman feel that we want these movies to have. But I'd be interested to see a project like try that approach. Malik mentioned that the action in this movie is better shot than it is in Begins, and we don't have a ton of it. There's really not a lot of fisticuffs in this movie, and there is a degree still of working with the kind of clunky costume. But stuff like this, I think, really sells you on Batman as like I love this. Like this is just such a clever move, and like ensures that everyone gets out like relatively safely. But yeah, like they still sell the action, and it's directed a bit better, I think. And this is really our, not our first, because they fight earlier at the party, but this is our real only straight up Batman v Joker fist fight, just straight up wailing on each other. And Joker certainly tried, but Batman has previously armed himself against dogs specifically, so better luck next time. Should have gone with cats, I guess. And you know what? Hyenas. We've never had the Joker utilize hyenas properly in these movies. You get a hyena in Harley Quinn, and it doesn't do anything, so. Note for the Batman, give me some hyenas. I like the interesting sort of contrast that's happening here, where you can tell, like from the start, that the convict is the guy who's like playing on his own image as like this big scary dude who like knows how to kill people and is experienced with making that choice, when really he's made the choice in his mind already that he's not going to press that button, versus this other guy who on the civilian boat talks up this big game of like being the guy who has to make the hard decision, and he's the only one who's got the courage to get his hands dirty. And when he actually has to take a moment to think about it, he doesn't have it in him to do it either. And so it's a really interesting, again, it plays into this being the movie's opportunity, and it takes it to humanize the criminal element of where there's at least some criminals, or at least this guy, who would never have even considered blowing up a whole boat full of innocent people. And one of those innocent people maybe thinks they have it in them to be that kind of person, and they just don't. And it's the sense that, like, even the civilian with the most bravado and the criminal who has the most sort of faux bravado, even those people who are kind of like extreme personalities, they will not go to the lengths that the Joker just assumes that any person will go to. So, for as screwed up as a setting as Gotham can be, and like Joker, if he was ever going to be correct in his point, he'd be correct here for how corrupt and like broken down as this place is. Even just the average on the ground people who make up this very problematic city are still fundamentally good, noble, selfless people. Oh, come on, Bruce. I wanted to hear what third story he had cooked up. But which is the force and which is the object is the question. And like, I love this. I love that with the boats, the Joker is like briefly put off and discouraged by the fact that he's ultimately proven wrong. But like, Batman, just the existence of Batman continues to give him something to live for, Like, even if his ultimate philosophical point about people and like the populace of Gotham ultimately isn't true, that doesn't mean that he like has a break and he's like done. Instead, his response is, well, you know what? If Batman's going to represent this ideal, then I might as well just keep playing this game and like best two out of three, onwards and upwards forever, pretty much. And also, he already has proof in his own mind that he's correct, and that's Harvey. So it would be easy to like look at this situation from the Joker's perspective and go like, 2 rounds, I have one, Batman has one. Let's go back and forth, like have this debate now till the end of time. Someone get him though. Like the blood is going to his head. And like again, that's the last that we will see of Heath Ledger. And my God, am I gonna miss that guy? What a talent! The track that plays over this scene, it hasn't started yet, but like what when it's coming up, it's ludicrously intense. It just builds and builds and builds, and like this whole scene, like Batman fighting the Joker and like beating him, is not the climax of the movie. This is the climax, and it is a lot. And the way that his other half is completely shadowed in this scene, this is a lot. Oh gosh. And like Joker wouldn't be wrong to look at this situation and be like, I've won as far as Harvey's concerned. Because like at this point he is too far gone. There's no coming back from this. God, this is a lot. This idea of like it's not about what I want, it's about what's fair. There's a lot to read into there. And this idea of like, obviously Harvey's not correct. It is about what he wants. And like he, psychological break aside, projects this idea of 50-50 as fairness, as to like the way of the universe, because that is what he wants and that allows him the validation that he wants. When really the thing that makes Two-Face inherently villainous and inherently problematic is that that's not how life works. Like fairness is not a 50-50 for everyone in every circumstance. Also, smart move by Bruce to like go down at the gunshot, even though like we know that his suit's bulletproof. Also, really like the performance by Eckhart again. He doesn't get enough credit. We've been guilty of this across this commentary, but his performance gets lost in the conversation a lot because Ledger stands out so much. And like we haven't talked too much about Oldman or Bale either, but everyone is just doing the most, especially in this scene. And that little bit of relief that he has when he doesn't have to shoot himself is great. I'll say, and like this is just not really a problem with this movie because it can only do so much. From the beginning, like from my first time seeing this movie, I always felt like I don't know if a fall from that height would have instantly killed Harvey the way it does. But that's another thing that I also really like about having this be the climax of the movie. It's that the big heroic thing that Batman does isn't any sort of larger scale thing. He doesn't save the whole city. It's him saving a single child's life by tackling somebody. And there's just something really admirable about having that really be the denouement of the whole movie. And the unfortunate thing about like what Gordon is saying right now with the whole like we bet all of this on Harvey and his reputation is that in an ideal world you wouldn't have to have like the soul of your city rest entirely on one person. But Gotham is such a corrupt, miserable place that the true bright, like honorable souls are so few that when one shows up in a position of power, that's what ends up happening. And so, like, again, it all comes down to the unfortunate, like, the fact that Gordon, for as good of a guy as he is emblematic of Gotham and that he's always able, like, willing to make compromises. And if only Gotham had been a place that had been allowed to have more uncompromisingly good people, then Batman wouldn't have to like go on the run for Harvey's sake. And, like destroying the bat signal is like super impactful. Like again, it speaks to the power of this movie that this is our one big Batman adventure that we get after his origin story, and yet we end and it really does feel like the end of an era. Like this movie used its time so well to like properly convey like a status quo where Batman is both at his peak and constantly surmounting challenges. And then we end with this tragic note of like, this is the one challenge where he has to take a dive. And so, like, the era of Batman and kind of a recognizable status quo of like working with the police is over. And like that iconic line of being the hero that Gotham deserves. Again, Batman is uncompromising, And like he is morally uncompromising in the way that Dent was, but Gotham is such a place that that kind of person can only safely operate from the shadows, and so he is what they deserve in that sense. And just, God, this movie is amazing. I feel really bad because we were really off on a roll, and this movie I think deserves a better send off than what it's getting here. But I think Malik might have fallen asleep, and so this is kind of a repeat of Spider-Man 3. Unfortunately, I was fine with that movie, and then kind of a sour note with the commentary, even if I didn't see it coming because it's Spider-Man 3, and I don't like that movie. But this movie is a straight up masterpiece. It's seen as, still to this date, the best superhero movie of all time by a lot of people. And it's not my favorite superhero movie of all time, but I'm not going to say anyone's wrong if they think that. That said, I hope that haphazard nature of this last 20 or so minutes aside, you were able to enjoy this commentary. And yeah, I hope we did a decent job carrying it through it. Let us know what you think about the commentary or about this movie or any points that we made in the comments. And unfortunately, it's going to be a while, like a couple of months, before Malik and I are both in a position to do our commentary for Rises. I know it sucks to hear that, but real world stuff happened, and yeah, unfortunately, that's the rub. We've both got other commitments, so we didn't want Rises to have to wait quite so long after these first two, but that's just the way that it's kind of shaken out. That said, that gives you something to look forward to. So until then, I hope you enjoy the rest of what we put out, and talk to you later.